From HanselMinutes.com, it's Hansel Minutes, a weekly discussion with web developer and technologist Scott Hanselman. This is Lawrence Ryan announcing show number 331, recorded live Wednesday, August 1st, 2012. This episode is brought to you by Telerik, offering the best in developer tools and support. Online at telerik.com. And by Franklins.net, training developers to work smarter. And now offering GesturePak, a powerful gesture recording and recognition system for Microsoft Connect for Windows developers. Details at gesturepak.com. In this episode, Scott talks with Iris Classon about starting programming.
Hi, this is Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today, we've got Iris Classon. You're calling from Sweden right now?
Yes, that's true. From Sweden, yes. Hi.
Hi, and you're originally Romanian, but you spent most of your life in Norway. You have a very, very colorful background.
Yeah, I have. I was born in Romania, moved to Norway when I was 5 years old, and I've also lived in France, Denmark, and a little bit over 3 years in Australia before moving to Sweden about 4.5 years ago. Yeah, so I've been moving around a lot.
So one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show was a couple of things. First, you've got a whole bunch of fans on Twitter who said, you've got to have Iris on the show. And I wasn't familiar with you, but I started looking around and I realized that what's interesting about your story and why we thought it would be fun to have you on the show was that you have been programming for just about a year. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. It's official. I've only been programming for a year.
So you started out in a totally different field. If I understand correctly, you're actually a registered dietitian and a personal trainer, and are more involved. You're more of a fitness person than a traditional coder who's been programming since you could talk.
Yeah, like some people grew up with a computer. I grew up with apples and running. So yeah, it's true. I'm a registered dietitian, a clinical dietitian, personal trainer, and also a nutritionist. So for the most part of my life, I've been working within the health and private healthcare and fitness industry.
So how did you get started in computers? I mean, were you someone who just had email and wasn't very technical and then discovered coding one day, or how did that start?
I was one of those people you tell to please try turning it off and on. And then you'll have to come do it for me, and it actually works. I was studying nutrition in Australia, and that's where I met my husband. And what happened was I wasn't really happy with studying nutrition, but somehow when I grew up, for me that seemed like one of the few options I had as a girl. You know, you could become a hairdresser, a dermatologist, or nurse, or you could work within health. You know, a lot of caretaking options, I would say. So I started studying nutrition because it felt right out of those options. But I was really, really unhappy with my studies, and I struggled a lot because I didn't have fun, and I kind of had a gut feeling it wasn't what I wanted to do. But I didn't know what else to do. And while we were studying in Australia, one day I was so upset, and I had been crying. I had just been upset for a very long time. So we sat down, me and my husband, and we made a list of all the possible jobs we could think of, like all the jobs. I think we even made up a few, you know, just to fill out the list. Once you get going, you want to add a few more. And then we wrote down what I'm good at and what I like doing. And that's actually how we came up with the idea that maybe programming would be something for me. And at that point, I didn't even have a computer. So we just pieced it together based on what I like and how I am as a person. Because, yeah.
Is your husband a programmer, that he would have this idea?
No, he's not actually. He's a system specialist, so not programmer, but he does know he's part of IT, and he's really good with hardware as well. So he knew of the options.
Now, yeah. for some people who are thinking of getting into software or engineering or computer science, they'll have a number of reactions. They might feel, this is boring. Coding is boring. and it's not an exciting career. That's the perception that a lot of people have. Why were you not immediately turned off by the kind of classic media perception that one has of programming and nerds and the intellectual pursuit?
Well, because the way I saw it, I wanted to have a job that wasn't a job. I just wanted to be doing something else for 8 to 10 hours a day. That was what I wanted. So for me, I was just looking for something that would make my day interesting and something that would be fun. So I never thought about what others were saying or what others were thinking.
Surely you must have had some image in your mind about what a programmer did.
Yeah, I did have a couple of images, such as, you sit down in the basement, it's completely dark, you have like 5 computer screens, and I had that image, but at the same time, it didn't really scare me, because I guess it's 2011 at the time. It was 2011, and as my experience has been that often the way we think things are, they're never that way.
You said you grew up in Romania initially, but then most of your formative years in Norway. Do they teach women differently in Norway? Is there any kind of a stigma between, as far as women learning math or science or becoming doctors or hard engineering?
I think I would actually say that in Romania they're more pro towards having, for example, women learn math and engineering compared to Norway. Norway, I would say, is very old-fashioned and probably one of the countries that are the most old-fashioned. So that was a problem. I do remember having a math teacher telling us that women weren't capable of adding numbers because our brain didn't work that way. So I don't think he was capable of adding friends because his brain didn't work that way. So yeah, no, I would actually say on contrary that I didn't fare that well with math in school because of that, because they would prioritize the boys.
So you don't know whether, or you didn't know whether your brain worked that way or not, because they didn't give you the chance to try, it sounds like.
I didn't do well in school, but I would do well otherwise. And my mom's an engineer and also a math teacher, so I kind of knew because she would help me. And
well, did you get a chance to succeed in school, or did something else keep you from doing well in school? You say.
I did pretty shit in school, to be honest. Most of all because I was a very difficult student. In the Norwegian school system, you're not supposed to ask questions. You're just supposed to sit there and just listen, and I had a hard time doing that. So I was always asking questions, which made me quite unpopular with most of the teachers. So I didn't do too well. I actually stopped going to school and dropped out. And what I did, I just packed my bags when I was 18, 19, and I moved to Denmark. And I just studied up for all the exams on my own instead, and got top grades. But when I was in school, I had bottom grades. I did really, really bad. Once I got the control, I did well. But in the school setting, I did pretty bad.
So it's interesting that you say that, and maybe you have a touch of ADHD, and these are typically personality traits. They're stereotypes. So I understand that every time we mention a stereotype, someone who's listening will email us and say, well, that's a stereotype. But yeah, they're stereotypes because there may or may not be something behind it. But people who have attention disorders can sometimes turn those into a strength and really learn that they're good at focusing on something. So it sounds like you may have some personality traits that will make you a very good programmer. What do you think about that?
I think definitely. I do have adult ADHD, and I wasn't able to take any medications because they were they wouldn't work so well with my body. Couldn't eat, sleep, or pretty much I could not function on the meds. So I've done a lot of behavioral therapy for many years, and for me it actually turned out to be an advantage, because if you have a large amount of energy and you learn how to focus it, which is very difficult, but once you do have an advantage, because you have all that energy that you can actually use for something productive.
Interesting. And then you have a number of obsessions, and I don't think you would mind me using that word. You are a very physical trainer, and you mentioned to me that you train as much as 10 or even 14, 15 hours a week.
Yes, I do.
So you're doing hardcore training, and one of the things that strikes me and strikes people about your blog is that you often draw a parallel between something that you're doing as far as working out and something that you're doing in software.
Yeah. Well, for me, I find some similarities between the two mindsets. You know, the mindset when you are a programmer and when you're working out. It's because it is about development, developing yourself, developing code, developing your body, and I think it's a good way to describe problems and solutions.
And it's interesting. That makes me wonder why more programmers don't see that parallel. I mean, it seems so obvious when you say it that, good input in gets you good input out. And programmers will put a lot of work into making code perfect so that when they put good things in, good things come out. But they might do that while drinking Mountain Dew and Fritos, in the basement.
Yeah. Well, I do that sometimes, but it'll probably be a diet Coke. I think sometimes people get so comfortable in what they're doing, and sometimes also so scared to do something else. One thing I've really noticed, and especially the latest week with all the craziness on Twitter, I started to get also negative emails and comments and things like that. And there seems to me that there is a lot of people who are very scared of things that are new and different, and it's so easy to find that one thing or that few things that you are really good at, and you just grab it and you just hold on for dear life, and you just don't want to step out of that box, because you think, I haven't been working out ever in my life, I can't go to the gym and compete with everybody else there. But that would be like me thinking the same a year ago. Look, I've never ever even seen code in my life. Does that mean I'm never going to be able to become a programmer? I disagree.
That's one of the things that is a little bit tricky right now, is that more and more people are good at programming. People have been doing it for a long time. There's a lot more things to know. So while you can't be an expert at everything, you can certainly specialize. So, 5-10 years ago, there weren't any Ruby programmers, and now there are Ruby experts and Ruby rock stars and things like that. Yeah. Do you find when you kind of look at the sum total of all the things that you don't know, and when you look at all of the people in the community, do you feel overwhelmed? Like sometimes I feel like I'm never going to be able to be good at this because there's just too many things to know.
Sometimes I get overwhelmed. One of the first projects here at work, I was really overwhelmed because I was working with a very, very good programmer. And I honestly didn't understand anything. I was completely lost and I was very overwhelmed. But I do remember something I was told on my first day of school. I was told by a person working there, and he said, the problem is that often with girls, because we were discussing why there were so few female programmers, he said, when a guy learns something and he learns a little bit, he'll go like, oh God, I'm the greatest person in the world, I know everything. But when a girl learns something, she'll just look at it, and then she'll look at everything else she doesn't know, and she'll say, oh no, I'm not good enough because I don't know all this and all that. And that actually stuck with me, because I have kind of sometimes been thinking like that. I'll just focus on everything else that is left to learn. So what I did, I just decided to, you know what, I'm going to be just as proud of my hello world as whenever somebody allows me to touch a large distributed system. I'm going to be happy for every little thing I learn, and hopefully I'll manage to catch up. If not, I don't care.
Well, that's definitely the right attitude. It makes me wonder why more people don't have that kind of attitude. There's a self-esteem there that I think that a lot of people don't have. I did a blog post a while back about being a phony. Are you familiar with that term?
Yeah, I am.
And a lot of people feel like that. And people were surprised when I did that blog post that I felt like a phony sometimes. That, sometimes you just don't know something, or you go on vacation for a month and some new thing or new pattern or new library comes out, and then you're like, oh man, I'm just barely hanging on.
Yeah.
But I can do Hello World, and that's more than some people can do, and I can do, FizzBuzz or whatever the new interview question that people are doing right now. It sounds like you have a healthy attitude.
Oh, thank you. I have to say, there's been a lot of good support in the community, but now for the people listening, are just easy on the pressure, because everybody is so keen on giving advice that advice turns into rules. A good programmer does that. A good programmer does this, and you just get more and more and more and more rules to follow, and that's when I get overwhelmed with all the rules, and it's a lot to take in.
Yeah, I think I like that though. You said advice turns into rules. I think that programmers, remember that programmers as a job, our job is to make declarative statements, and we make them in code, and they compile, and they work. So it's unfortunate that we'll take those declarative statements that we make, and then we'll just turn them into actual declarative statements we'll make in life. Like, thou shalt do this, thou shalt do that. So we'll be talking to other people like we are programming them. Yeah.
It turns into a private club with a certain set of rules and also expected behavior. Look, I've read a couple of the books, Clean Coder, and all those, Pragmatic Programmer, and they're really good books, but if you want to read something that's going to give you really bad self-esteem, those books might help a little bit, because unfortunately I think they're supposed to give a lot of good advice, but especially as a newbie or just a person just starting out with programming, when you read those, you kind of feel like you have to do it now and that everybody's doing it, and if you don't, you're not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of learned that it's just advice, and it's an ideal world, and it's great if you get there, but you don't suck if you don't.
Well, what do you think that the community needs to do differently to make things more friendly for newbies? I mean, not every newbie who's been programming a year has got a job, and you've accomplished that, nor have they been on Twitter and been loud on Twitter. And there may be 1,000 newbies that are listening to this that feel overwhelmed and like they don't have anything to say. But you put a blog up, and you actually have a series on your blog that I find really interesting, where you're actually asking stupid questions, and you actually came out and called them stupid questions. What do you tell the community about how to make things more friendly to newbies, especially ones who aren't as forward as you are?
Well, I would say they have to show more acceptance, because they have to show more acceptance, because there is also this stigma that you have to act and be like a nerd to be accepted in the community. And honestly, I'll say now, I have no idea if I'm a nerd. I like fashion, I like makeup, and I like high heels, and I like working out. I like cooking and traveling. And I'm not sure if I would call myself a nerd, and I don't think that should matter. So there's a lot of all these rules making it really hard for new programmers if they feel like they don't fit in. When I went to school, one of the persons in my class, he was a chef. We had a chemist, and we have people who've been working with completely different things. And I reckon still they're quite good programmers today, and they'll get even better. But it's so important to feel like you belong. And when all these rules exist of how you have to behave and how you have to act and talk and all that, if you feel like you don't fit in, then you kind of, you'll remove yourself from that community with time. And that's a big loss for the community, I reckon.
Yeah, I think you're right. I wonder how many people we've lost through negativity or lack of openness. And I also worry about women or people who aren't just your average, middle-aged man. There are a lot of women out there who don't use their pictures as their avatars. They use a name that's not their real name because it's such a negative community towards anyone who's different.
Yes, it is, and I was thinking about that latest yesterday. I have no idea what to do. Should I just focus on my programming skills, or can I allow my personality and me as a person to be included? Because I think how I am as a programmer, a big part of it is how I am as a person. That is my selling point, not just the code. I don't want to be reduced just to code. But it seems like I won't get the respect of the community unless I do just that. Is that true?
It depends on who you're hanging out with. There are clubs and there are groups that like things to be a certain way, but I like to think of the community as being a meritocracy. They say talk is cheap, show me the code. If you might start, let's be honest, you might start out as an oddity. People might say, hey, she's dyed her hair bright red and she's a woman and she works out. So here's 3 things that make you, different than the typical. Hopefully, being a woman will be the least of those things. That's strange, and people will, they might follow you, and I don't necessarily mean follow you on Twitter, but follow you in your career initially, because oh, here's an interesting woman, and then you'll immediately, hopefully, raise the discourse to an intellectual one, and people will forget that, oh, by the way, Iris is a woman. But wow, have you read her blog? And the woman thing, I would hope, would fall away. There's always there's the old internet joke that on the internet no one knows that you're a dog. You might be like an actual canine, but as long as you can code and your pull request compiles, it doesn't really matter. So if one chooses to flaunt isn't the right word, but to emphasize some aspect about them, then they will, they are controlling their personal brand. Like I could have hidden the fact that I'm diabetic, and I know people who have hidden that for various personal reasons, but it's a part of who I am. And if I had done that, maybe people would have treated me different in some jobs, but I wouldn't have gotten involved in healthcare coding and medical device, organizations and things like that. If you hid your fitness penchant, then you might not get an offer at some point in the future to work on fitness software. Or if you decided to, instead of being Iris with a Iris avatar, you could have just become a Simpsons character and never said a word about your your location or your nationality or your interests.
Well, I want to have a face.
Well,
I don't want to be a celebrity, but I want to have a face. And because I believe like a lot of especially young women who want to learn programming, want to become a programmer, who are they supposed to turn to? Where can they find somebody where can they find a friend, So I want to have a face because I reckon I'm strong enough to take the crap that might come with having a face. But my code has a face, but the code I'm hoping will be of top-notch quality. But I want to have a face. No, I think that's great.
I think that I have a feeling that will be the line out of this podcast that people will remember, because I think you're right. The code should stand on its own. But when someone digs behind it to find out that person, they'll find a person with diverse interests and a diverse personality, and that isn't simply, a woman wrote this, or, someone with red hair wrote this, or whatever.
Look, somebody with green short hair might read it. I wouldn't
Yes.
judge.
No judging implied. Well, I was
him,
at OSCON. I was at OSCON, the open source conference recently, and I think there were more people with purple and blue hair than there were people with real hair. So I think that there's nothing against people who color their hair purple or whatever.
No, because it's cool. Look, it was cool when I was 14, and I reckon it's still cool now.
So, did you go and get a software engineering degree, or is this all still self-taught?
Well, we have different types of schools in Sweden. This type is actually more of a practical training. It's a 2-year school, and I went the first year. I won't do the second year. I'll just do the exams, but I won't attend the lectures, as I've already gone through the material that we'll be doing the next year. It's a very good school, and I've enjoyed it very much, and I've learned as much as I could from there. And but a lot I had to do on my own. So you still have to do your own studies next to school. I think everybody
well, like you
knows
said, your
that.
previous education was in nutrition and specifically clinical nutrition. I'm sure that you went to school for that, but then also did studying on the side. What do you think about the balance that one needs to find between a formal education and an ongoing education that you learn on your own at home?
I think the most important is you have to have that real passion. The moment you think I should, or you feel like you have to do it, and you remove the I want to do it, that's when you're going to struggle. And the hard part about studying on your own is you have to have discipline, because nobody's going to expect anything from you. It's just you, the books or the tools you choose to use, but it's just you. You have to make yourself proud. Nobody's going to, clap their hands once you're done with it. So you won't get a grade, you won't get anything, you might even miss out on some sleep. You just have to find the pride in what you are doing from yourself.
Where does that drive come from, though? I think a lot of people, after a few years in the business, get pretty tired. And I've talked to a number of programmers that are burned out. Now, you've only been doing this a year. I've been doing this almost 20.
Yes.
And I admit to being very tired sometimes. And I wouldn't mind going and becoming a clinical nutrition person and a fitness person, and you can have my job. You know what I mean? Like, how do you know you're going to be this excited in a year or 10 years?
I know, because I've spent most of my life being very unhappy, being very miserable, and just hating everything with my life and myself. Didn't even want to live. I was in a very, very dark place for very, very many years. And once I saw the light at the end of the tunnel and I managed to pull through, I just realized how many years I've lost. And I just feel like I have a lot of catching up to do. And I've wasted too much time on that. So it's time to be happy, passionate, and enjoy life and all the possibilities I get now. I wasted so many years, and I can't afford to do that again, because you never know how life's going to turn out. You know what the end will be, but you don't know how long it's going to take until you get there.
That's funny.
So,
my dad always, I don't know if your dad is the same way, but fathers always have these 3 or 4 things that they say constantly, like these sayings. For the last 40 years, my dad has always said, whenever we talk about life, he says, none of us are getting out of this alive.
It's true. It's true. Look, everybody's dying. Just some of us don't have a diagnosis, but we're all dying some way or the other. Well, that's a depressing thought, really. But
we won't end on that. So, what do we have to do as a community to get women and children more involved in computers? I've had a couple of people on the show. We've talked to some organizations like Black Girls Code that are focused on not only women but women of color. What do we need to do to get young women to not think that this is, a bad job? I think it's a pretty cool job. We need to catch them when they're 12 years old, though, not when
awesome job.
Maybe not when they're 30.
Well, I say it's the best job in the world. We have to be more supportive and less judgmental. I think those two things are very, very, very important. There is a certain form of elitism in all this. People who've worked really hard to get where they are might sometimes forget that they also were at day 0 once. So let's never, ever, ever forget that we all have written a hello world, and secretly was really, really happy about it. So let's not forget that. It used to be a big thing when we started out. Well, for me it still is, because I'm just starting out. But we must not forget that and understand that they need their cheerleaders, and we're supposed to be the cheerleaders.
That's great. I appreciate that. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Yeah, no, thank you for calling me. I hope I gave you some good answers.
No, there's a lot of really great, interesting information here and quotable quotes. And we'll make sure to put links to your Twitter as well as your blog, but people can find you at irisclasson.com, 2 S's, irisclasson.com, and also on Twitter. And this has been another episode of Hansel Minutes. We'll see you again next week.